Welcome to Poland Daily Culture.
I'm Paulina Otterstein.
And I'm John Carter.
And today we're in Oporów in a beautiful Gothic castle.
And in today's episode, Paula's going to be speaking to an expert on Oporów Castle. I'm going to be taking you around the museum to see the sights and around the garden and the surrounding area. So join us as we take you on a little adventure around this historic place.
Hello and welcome to Poland Daily Culture. Today we're in a beautiful place in Oporów Castle, one of the few Gothic castles in Poland kept with almost the same features. My guest today will be Mr. Andrzej Borucki. Dzień dobry, witamy serdecznie.
Dzień dobry, witam serdecznie. W latach 60. XX wieku został...
Many different people lived here. The establishment of a museum began in 1928. The museum only opened its doors in February 1949 and has been operating ever since. The castle was rebuilt and underwent restoration in the 1960s. The purpose of those works was to adapt it to museum standards. We must remember that before the Second World War there was no plumbing nor electricity here, very Spartan conditions. As I mentioned before, the Karski family only came here to hunt, since the conditions in their estate in Włostów were just so much nicer. Unfortunately, that palace was completely destroyed. Only bare walls survived, and now there are trees growing inside the remains of the building. What a beautiful place it was, completely destroyed. It was much bigger than the Oporów Castle. However, due to the fact that it has been a museum for 70 years, the Oporów Castle did not share the fate of other castles or manor houses.
Mostly original, is that right?
Części oryginalne, dlatego że odwiedzając Polskę mamy do czynienia z obiektami w dużej części.
It is worth mentioning that around 20,000 estates, the majority of which were historic sites, were completely destroyed. The Oporów Castle is in wonderful condition, one of the best ones in Poland. And for the main part, it is genuine. In the original state, it was built in the 15th century, which is outstanding since when we visit historical landmarks in Poland, most of them are reconstructed. Meanwhile, about 80% of this castle is in its original form. In the beginning of the 1960s, a restoration was initiated when the original geometry of the roofs was brought back. A wooden porch was also restored. During the renovation of this room here, the workers discovered a gorgeous polychrome ceiling. In fact, 3 rooms in this castle were embellished in this way, which meant that the classicist decoration which covered the ceiling and the walls of the castle was stripped down. Instead, the shape from the second half of the 17th century was restored. We can assume that this is the correct estimation, the 17th century, due to the fact that we are taking into account the fire which happened after the Swedish deluge. Therefore, the owners probably rebuilt these ceilings because there are no fire marks there. The same with the foundation of the roofs, no signs of fire. Well, for those 70 years of the museum operating, everyone could admire these historic interiors. These interiors bring back the spirit of the nobleman culture.
Ducha kultury szlacheckiej, ducha kultury ziemiańskiej dawnej. Nie jest to wierna rekonstrukcja dawnych wnętrz.
So these rooms that we can see today, they are not the same rooms as they were, let's say, 400 years ago.
Nie,
Is that correct?
To nie jest aranżacja na zasadzie wstał i wyszedł, tak jak to się...
No, this is not the kind of interior design that you can see in former nobleman residencies. There we can often see the original furnishing. At this point, it is worth mentioning the economic catastrophe which struck the Orsetti family in 1930, when literally every item was sold to the highest bidder, down to the last fork. I mentioned the fork because only 2 years ago we managed to recover 1 silver fork from the old tableware belonging to the Orsetti family.
Z dawnej zastawy stołowej srebrnej rodziny Orsettich. Wcześniej
Where was it found?
w Warszawie. Otrzymaliśmy to w darze od dawnego antykwariusza.
In Warsaw, we were given it as a donation from a former antique dealer. Before that, we recovered pieces from old dining sets, paintings. We are keeping in contact with the former owners of this castle, so we managed to buy out a couple dozen of such items. Nevertheless, they are not a part of the interior design. Those are being kept in display cases. They hang on the walls. The beauty of this castle was brought to life by the museum workers. Here it it is imperative to mention Grażyna Kin-Rzymkowska, who was the director of the museum for 45 years, from 1960 to 2005. That is an extraordinary achievement, unheard of in Poland. A truly recognized person for the museum industry in the area, a person who became a legend of the museum industry since she devoted her life to this castle. She lived here in a tiny room in the attic, which allowed her to be on duty 24 hours a day. Her heart was completely in her work, and her gentle, womanly touch brought the castle to life. Nowadays, her daughter is the director of this estate, and she was brought up in its walls. That is why this castle is such an extraordinarily interesting place, outstandingly beautiful one. It has been a living quarters for 600 years, for many different families. And it is not without reason that the late Professor Leszek Kaiser, a specialist on medieval architecture and archaeology, dubbed this castle the Happy Castle. A beautiful name which, in my opinion, does not only refer to the building that survived the blaze of history, but it also refers to the great directors and owners that took care of it over centuries.
Wspominam panią Grażynę Kin-Rzymkowską.
The castle in Oporów was built in the first half of the 15th century and is one of the few castles in Poland preserved in such good condition. It features a medieval knight defensive residence. Through the ages, it was always inhabited, saved against damage and distorting reconstruction, becoming the center of Poland's secular medieval architecture. The castle is situated on an island surrounded by a moat, which originally ran under the drawbridge situated in front of the arched gateway. Its compact layout is concentrated around a quadrangular courtyard, a residential house, two-story tower, and a flanking tower, with a chapel and defensive walls closing the courtyard to the north and east. The layout of the castle interior still remains almost unchanged. The first historical mention of Oporów comes from the second half of the 14th century. Then it was the seat of the Oporowski family, of the Sulima coat of arms, the most prestigious in the Łęczyce lands.
Speaking about the exhibits that are on display here now, which of them are the most significant ones?
Myślę, że gdybyśmy spacerowali po poszczególnych salach, można by przy każdym eksponacie się zatrzymać.
I think that if we went for a walk through every room, we would stop at every exhibit, speak about its worth, and tell stories about it. We have some wonderful items, art pieces, 18th century portraits of the castle's owners. Louis de Silvestre painted a portrait of Józef Sołochub, a very good portrait which is linked to our castle. We also have a portrait of a girl from the 17th century. Well, that might not have been a girl, it could have been any child, since in those times all children would be wearing dresses, regardless of their gender. Nevertheless, this portrait was dubbed the portrait of a girl. We also have works of Dutch and English painters who would paint women. There are many beautiful examples of European painting. We have a very interesting collection of porcelain and silverware. When it comes to porcelain, we have a number of pieces from the Meissen manufacture in Germany. We have one butter dish from the so-called Swan set, a plate coming from a set used by King Augustus III, the so-called Kalina set. We also have a collection of weapons. We have an armory where we displayed projectile weapons as well as bladed weapons. In terms of projectiles, we have a set of dual pistols from around 1850, manufactured by a Parisian company, Gaston René. This set was found in this castle, along two Küchenreuter dual pistols from Regensburg. That company still operates today. Those pistols were most likely hidden after the failure of the January uprising, which the Poles initiated against the Russian petitioners. After the fall of the uprising, the entire weapon reserves were confiscated by the Russians. Additionally, it was also probably around that time that a beautiful saber, awarded to one of the members of parliament by King Stanisław Augustus Poniatowski after the proclamation of Constitution in 1791, was hidden in the walls of this castle. This saber was found in a nearby estate, hidden behind a wall with a Russian saber. They both are in our collection. The saber is a very moving piece of art for us Poles, not only because sabers were our national weapon, but also because the said saber commemorates the declaration of the first European Constitution, the May 3rd, 1791 Constitution. This date is engraved on the saber itself. We also have the defensive weapons and armors, which we could talk a lot about. For example, the armor of a cuirassier from the 17th century, which is a Western European armor. We have a beautiful 17th century helmet from Nuremberg. We have a chainmail of an armored companion who was a Polish light cavalry knight. We also have an armor of a hussar, a winged Polish knight. So visiting the Oporów Castle, you can learn about different aspects of both Polish and European history. You can find something interesting in any room.
Historii kultury europejskiej w różnych jej aspektach.
Thank you very much for joining us here at Poland Daily Culture from Oporów Castle. I'm John Carter.
I'm Paulina Otterstein, and don't forget to watch us again and subscribe to our new YouTube channel, Poland Daily Live. See you soon.